Greetings. Happy New Year, dear itsdiff fans. This is Sri Srinivasa on behalf of itsdiff Academy and itsdiff Entertainment. We are having this leadership series program, as you all know. And feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, itsdiff Academy, and we'll put the links down there. And it's really a great pleasure and honor to have these podcasting series to share our learnings. And especially, we would like to bring eminent personalities who have done great accomplishment in their career, and also help bring a lot of leaders. They're all thought leaders, and we are going to meet one such thought leader in our show today, and that is none else than Mr. Mukundan, Seshadri Mukundan, and I know him for the last, I would say, 15 years. And we have been reconnecting after some years. We'll talk more about that. So Mr. Seshadri Mukundan has led several strategic and operational excellence initiatives, spanning a global footprint for manufacturing and supply chain, and designed to delivery of mind-to-market products and solutions, business growth programs, transformational and disruptive change programs, merger and acquisition activities. A very kind person, and very personable, and very good in communication. And I would like to welcome, on behalf of our itsdiff fans, Mr. Mukundan to our show. So let me welcome Mr. Mukundan. So the interesting thing is, we first met in Silicon Valley Indian Professional Association in the Bay Area, here in California, San Francisco Bay Area. And also we had shows at Stanford University when I was doing the itsdiff radio show on change management and a couple of leadership series. So it starts, goes back, I think, between 2005 to 2010. So that's our initial introduction period, and multiple shows we have done. So it's really a pleasure, sir, to have you on our show. And today's topic, welcome. Yeah, thank you, sir. And we are reconnecting after so many years now.
I'm very happy. Yeah. Thank you for the generous introduction. Really appreciate it. I'm glad to be back on your show again.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. And we would like to tap on to all your great mentoring skills, leadership skills, and your experience. And if we don't tap into and capitalize on this, and I think we are not optimizing the wonderful talent. Sir, today we are going to talk about skill map, and one of your passionate topic. So this is what we are going to cover in the leadership series. So could you just touch on what comes to mind when you talk about skill map? We know skill enrichment, we know some learnings that we do, but when you just initially brought that idea of a skill mapping, so that kind of kindled my interest. So could you please start from there, and then we'll get to the next 20 minutes of our conversation. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think, first of all, to the viewers, really appreciate your interest in listening to me through Sri, who made it possible. Whenever we think about career enrichment, or becoming an entrepreneur, or being an intrapreneur, two things will pop up. Obviously, we all have knowledge. We acquire knowledge from a variety of sources. And then we also have plenty of skills, which we keep on sharpening. I think the skill map is a pictorial way of capturing what are those few critical skills that we ought to have in order to succeed in whatever field that we choose to work on. Now, it doesn't matter whether we are an automobile engineer, or a software engineer, or a mechanic working in a roadside shop, or a teacher. The skill is something that we all ought to have to excel in whatever we want to end up doing. The skills are a variety of them. As Sri touched upon, leadership itself is a great skill. How to lead a team, how to really, make a good performing team to a better performing team, good to great transformations, and then how to communicate, how to resolve issues. So there are plenty of skills that we keep acquiring. Even without our knowledge, I think experience is all about that. Now, in the context of skill map, I always believe that there are a few skills that are going to be very critical in the field that we choose to be. For example, if I need to be an entrepreneur, there are a few skills that I ought to have, like negotiation skill, for example, or convincing an investor to put money into our this thing, where it could be a blend of communication, it could be a blend of leadership traits, all of that. So if we are able to clearly distinguish knowledge and skill, and if we are clearly able to map the skills which we ought to have, then drawing a skill map is going to be very easy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, skill map is just a pictorial way by which we capture what we think is right. Because if we go out to the field, you look at many of the Google write-ups or any of that, there will be plenty of skills that will be available to be mastered. Mentoring is a skill. Change management is another skill. But then, while it is nice to have many of these, or it's nice to acquire it from many of these institutions, the critical skills that we think we need to have to succeed in the chosen field that we want to be working on. That is what the skill map that's going to capture. Now, it may look a little simple, but then when you really take a deep dive and do a self-thinking in terms of, okay, there are plenty of skills that are available in the shelf, out of which I'm going to pick up 3 or 4 and I'm going to master them. Then I think we have solved, we have come to step 2 of 5 of excelling in that skill. Then within the chosen skills that we choose, then we ought to know where we are and where we want to be. And this whole skill, upskilling, de-skilling, reskilling is a continuing lifelong learning process in my view. Because we all started at a time when we did not have emails or we did not have photocopiers. For example, there used to be stenciling at that time. That is how we used to reproduce information. Now, computers came in, or when the emails came in, if we chose not to acquire that skill, then we would have been left behind. The same thing is happening today, right? There are plenty of skills that are available to be mastered. It could be an app writing, it could be coding, it could be any of that. But then no one can master everything. But then once we choose what we want to master in, then the skill map is a place whereby we capture it. It could be as simple as 2 or 3 skills that we think we ought to excel. And from there, we start the point. I was just reading the news this morning where Mr. Vinod Reddy has been appointed as a scribe writer for the US newly elected President, Mr. Biden.
President Biden.
Now, yeah, he must have come from a non-English kind of a background. But then he acquired the English skill of writing or communicating, and then he must have mastered it over a period of time, which is what has landed him to where he is today. So this whole art of skilling or upskilling or downskilling or reskilling is all about recognizing that there are plenty of skills available, but then capturing the essence of a few skills that we ought to have in order to succeed in our chosen career. And then how do we work on it to really improve on it so that we see a visible improvement. And this has worked very well, in my view, whenever there is a performance assessment that is being done. Assuming I've worked for companies in the past, and companies like Hewlett Packard, like Agilent Technologies, all that.
About
and
30
we
years
were
of
very, very,
yeah.
we were very, very fortunate, to be honest, to have excellent mentors as our managers who would be writing the development plan for us. Initially, the whole process, to me personally, I can reflect back on what I thought that the whole development planning and all that is more or less like a kind of waste of time, if you call it. But then I realized that once you put a lot of effort in, and once your manager recognizes, because somebody, it's like our button is not all right, then it's easier for someone else to recognize it than myself.
Okay.
So once your manager recognizes you and he recognizes the skills that you ought to have, but you are missing on it, then it becomes a very positive conversation whereby he's able to say that these are 5 areas. He's not going to say, go and study a book on it, or go and research something on this. However, he is in a good position to recognize what we need to have, but what we are missing. And that is the starting point for the skill map. I'll probably close it at that point from that point, because otherwise I'll keep bragging on that. But it is very important, in my view, having a skill map in front of us, even if it is not drawn on a paper, at least the mental map that we all have, recognizing the critical few skills that we ought to have, and then consciously working on it to move from where we are to where we ought to.
Okay. Wonderfully said. I have a couple of questions. I've noted down something. So one of the things, Mukundan, I've read is, first of all, you need to decide on what you want to do, what gives you more happiness, or what's your career path. So for most of us, that itself is a challenge, because you know what, where do I go? Like, for example, do I learn data science? Do I learn about all this about artificial intelligence, for example, or do I take about a typical C++ general coding, right? Or Node.js, React, and look at all this kind of front end UI UX kind of area, right? Or the back end or database related, for example, in the IT field. Or let's take a non-systematic area, like do I take into, for example, supply chain, right? Or anything on the procurement area, or do I take into manufacturing, or any field, or medicine, for example. The interest is inculcated when you are pretty young. So some people have that ambition either through their parents or through their colleagues, or in the sense friends rather, right? And then you tend to perceive an idea, and then at some point in their life they are able to pursue, work hard, and get to the next level. And in some cases there are people who tried something, they didn't succeed, they failed, and they thought that's it, right? Even when we talked offline, you mentioned about some example of engineers who pursued their career as engineers, but they could not get a job which is equivalent to what they have studied, and they settled down for a lower wage job which doesn't give their satisfaction, but they just wanted to get both ends meet, so they just wanted to do that. So the first challenge is, how do I pick the right career? Second thing is, once when I pick the career, then the mapping comes where I have current skills for the job, but I wanted to go from X to Y. So in order to reach Y, these are the three things that I need to acquire to get to that Y. So that part of that Y itself is a big challenge. I don't even know, is that a Y or a Z or whatnot? So what are your thoughts on that? So how do we help that?
Yeah, wonderfully stated. I think very, very relevant at this point of time when we are crowded with so many things around us. See, first of all, I think we always talk about this seatbelt versus engine example, right? In an aircraft, if there is an engine issue, you very well leave everything, attend to it. If for any reason there is a seatbelt that is not working, you attach little less priority to that. So learning is all about that as well, in my view. We need to have a very clear, again, if 25 years back, if somebody had asked me the same question, maybe my answer would have been slightly different. But having come through this life, I feel that at a very early stage in our life, we all ought to be able to distinguish between a seatbelt issue and an engine issue. The engine is something that is going to push us forward. The seatbelt things are things that it's nice to have. Even if there is a little bit of a flaw here and there, it's okay. But, yeah, for example, if I have set my sight on being a coding person, for example, then little bit of financial knowledge is always helpful, but I don't need to be a master in reading a balance sheet or valuing a company or doing all that. While they are all nice to have, my core skill or my core competence is to be built around coding. The second thing that I always feel is that at a very young age, I'm sure we all like to do things. For example, if I'm given a choice between playing cricket and going to school, if I were to be a cricketer, I would obviously choose playing cricket. So over a 1 month exercise, I'm very sure right in the morning, the first few things that we start to work on, there may be a action list of 10 things that we need to do in that week or in that day. But then the first 3 or 4 things that we lay our hand on is where our passion lies. It is very natural, right? For example, if there is a buffet and you are a dosa fan, then obviously you're going to go and pick up dosa first. You're not going to go and pick up a paratha just because it's there in the buffet. So the same analogy will work for life as well, in my view, whereby the few things that you are very passionate about, or unknowingly you have a liking for it, or you have a special interest in that area, are the first few things that we always end up doing first. Now, over a month, if we carefully analyze this is actually taught. I learned it from one of my Japanese bosses, Mr. Toru Murakoshi-san. He always will say that the first thing that you touch in the morning is the one that you like most. Now, there will be 10 things that you ought to do, but then the item number 6 in that list is what you will first start doing, because that is where you think you have a natural interest to come in. So merging these two principles, first is that recognizing what we want to be doing or where we are passionate about. We may not be able to articulate it like a few people at a stage in our life where we are probably just starting our career, for example. At that time, these definitions may not hold good always. But nevertheless, if we are able to carefully analyze where our really heart is going to get things done, those are those few areas where we, I think, can master.
Okay.
Then comes the seatbelt versus engine analogy, whereby there will be a lot of skills around, like you're talking about, the coding languages, there are artificial intelligence, so much of skilling that could be done, but then trying to touch each one of them and say that, okay, this is not good, this is not good. That instead of doing that laborious process, if we are able to be clear on what our interest lies and how we can pick the chosen skill that is related to that interest, then combining these two, I think, will fast track either our career or our entrepreneurship path.
Yeah, I think very well said, sir, because the reason is, you said about the first thing that you touch in the list is what you are passionate. The question is, for most of us, I cannot generalize it, but we don't even have a list in first place. Okay. Then second,
that is a skill that we need to acquire. I think writing down that itself is a skill.
Correct. So if you do a to-do list, for example, it's okay. You can break it up into mundane tasks that you do. There are some things that you are passionate of doing, which may not be worthwhile in some cases, or the main thing which we often, as the industry experts, say is the strategic initiative, which will take you from point A to point B, considered as a growth factor, considered as complex. People don't go and they deprioritize. So in your case is make a to-do list, prioritize them, group them or bucket them, attack them. So at least start somewhere. This is what I mean. I'm not an expert like you, but I'm just learning. So start and then try, keep doing it, and then you enrich. One example I read somewhere, a guy who was cutting woodcutter, cutting trees. He was able to cut about 10 trees a day. It came down to 8 trees and then 5 trees and 3 trees. And he said, that's it, man. You know what? I'm done. Actually, I'm not no fit for the job. If somebody was passing by and he said, what is happening? This is the story. He said, did you ever try to resharpen the axe at all? Oh, am I supposed to do that? So that's the point. So it's like this. If you look at the professional stuff, one has to constantly retool himself and sharpen the pencils, sharpen the skills. And that's pretty much back to the topic of skill mapping. See, what do you aspire to do and what are your skills that you have? What do you need to go? Get a mentor, help find out, talk to friends, like-minded people, and go to form your professional network, and then get some guidance. And then it's like a sharing. It's like a network effect. You share, you give, and you take. I think pretty much that's all there in the 3 things you mentioned: your upskilling, your reskilling, and retooling. So I would like you to please help us to decipher this.
Sure. Before I get into that, see, I used to follow something called 50-30-20 rule. Sure. It's just a common definition, You rightly said that, we tend to spend more time in things that may not give us the best return. Because it could be easy to do it, but then never recognized. Now, I'll give one example that may make it much easier. Whenever there are individual contributors wanting to become a people manager, in most of our lives, we might start off as a team player, and then at some point of time, we will become a team leader, and then we'll become a team manager. Let's assume that this is a normal progression. In graduating from being an individual contributor to a people manager, this critical skill that we all have to have is to manage people. How do you manage? How do you get things done rather than how do you do it? Now, as a team player, your focus is productivity. For example, given 8 hours, I should be able to convert a certain problem into a certain output. But then when you become a people leader or when you become a people manager, Nobody is going to measure you on how good your coding is or how productive you are in you doing that job. Instead, people are going to focus on how well you are able to articulate the situation, how well you are able to align everybody's vision to the same cause, and how well you are able to extract the maximum from each one of them so that 1 + 1 is not 2, instead it is 11. So a critical skill that is required while graduating from being an individual player to a team leader is the people management skill. Now, this is often overlooked, in my view, personal view, is that when you become a people manager, we again start ending up doing whatever we like to do. If that is so, then I think we will be measured on a wrong basis. So this 50-30-20 rule, which is what I often passionately talk about, is that 50% of the time, I think we ought to be thinking about the strategic things that are there as part of our job. That is what is going to give the maximum return, in my view. After all, if an organization employs you, they're employing us for a purpose. And that purpose is that they need 3x of our spend or whatever as the gain. Now, that comes with total focus and attention on this 50% of the time. The 30% of the time is the operational excellence we are talking about, wherein it's not only strategy that is going to produce results. Obviously, we all have to be strategic, but at the same time, we need to know how to convert that strategy into operational plans. And that is 30% of the time. And that is going to be important, but at the same time, that's not going to be highly visible. The 20% of the time is what is our continuous improvement, personal learning, all of that. So in setting this whole thing together, if I put the skill map first, and then identify the critical skills that are required to perform whatever we are performing, and then we are able to allocate our time in a proposition whereby consciously every day, every week, we spend that much amount of time on these 3 buckets, then whatever we were talking about, the sharpening the axe, the upskilling, all of that will fall in place. Now, let me talk very briefly about what I mean by upskilling and then reskilling and, saying. So upskilling is obviously, if I take a teacher as an example. Now, my father was a teacher. So all of us have some teacher association in our lives. Without teachers, we won't be where we are today, right? Now, a teacher is also a human being, obviously. And he learns a few things in his school, college, all of that. But then if he continues to teach that for the entire 30-35 years of his career, you know what the result would be. Because what he learned in the college or what way he was taught in the college might not be very relevant today. He might have used a blackboard at that time. Today, we are talking about digital boards. Now, he might have used a book to read out in the class. Today, we are talking about PowerPoint presentations and PDFs and all of that. Now, if we take that path, unless the teacher upskills from what way he was taught or from the background with which he came in, he would not be very relevant today. So the same example applies to all the careers in my view. I just took teaching as an example. But I think the same underlying principle applies to everyone. I think every 5 years, all of us need to relook at our skill map and say, okay, this was relevant in the past 5 years. But then is this relevant? Is this continuing to be relevant? Maybe a few elements of that teaching may continue to be relevant for 35 years. That's fine. But the methodology of teaching, the process by which this thing is there, the process by which the assessment is done, all of that has changed. The assessment was usually, exam where we write and then he used to evaluate and then give us a mark. Today, assessments have become online, most of them. So long story short, what I'm trying to say is that upskilling is a very, very important part in everyone's career, be it career or even for a housewife, in my view. I think if I'm sure all of us can relate it, the gadgets that we have used 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So if we take a position that, no, I'm only used to, doing it my hand way in grinding, we won't be relevant today. So upskilling is all about recognizing what is changing and adapting to that change and then retooling ourselves in order to take that challenge on. So that extends to reskilling as well. Reskilling is something, upskilling is something that we already have, and then we try to change it to what is relevant today. Okay. Now, reskilling is another dimension of it, in my view. For example, when we are employed by companies, then certain skills that you think you need to have, you may not have. For example, the finance skill I'm talking about. Now, the finance skill meaning reading a balance sheet or the thing, that's a knowledge acquired skill. But then when you become an entrepreneur or when you want to do something on your own, obviously the landscape changes. It is not about how well you manage the team in your organization. It's the same thing is going to be equally be relevant, but at the same time, people are going to expect, how do you spend the money? If I give you $10, are you going to wastefully waste it? Or you're going to constructively use it? So those are skills that we need to be acquiring or upskilling at that time, so that at that point of time we stay relevant.
Sure. I think very well said, Mr. Mukundan, because one thing you mentioned about why an individual contributor who have been recently promoted as a people's manager continued to think the same way as he has been is because for poor delegation, right? So you don't want to delegate that responsibility. You feel like I'm the only one who can do this job very well, and it's a question of trust. It's the problem, most challenge is that itself is a skill for the managerial skill, trust but verify. So you need to, so that's where you also very rightly said earlier about mentoring and coaching. Like you have been mentored, you need to start build the leadership capabilities of your own team, and that is become one of your charter, one of your responsibilities. So delegate is the thing which we need to do that. So I think maybe that could be the reason you mentioned. And then the next one is again the disruptive innovation as technology innovations and the innovative thinking is happening. Everybody goes after cost reduction and doing things efficiently and trying to get ahead of the competition that is out there. So you cannot feel like be in the same place where you were 30 years ago. And if you think that the world does not change, that means there is something wrong with the individual's thinking aspects. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you have to adapt, right, to such things, right? So thank you. So life is a continuous learning process. So one has to rightly, as you pointed out, upskill and retool and reskill. Again, the question here is what else would you think that the individual can do in terms of skills enrichment? So you said even a spreadsheet can do, some kind of a graphical representation can do. Please give us some more guidance and pointers for us.
Sure. I'll reflect back on one healthy practice that we developed in our earlier organizations. There used to be the results that we produce in a particular role definitely gets us noticed, which means people will start to recognize, given a task to this guy, he will be able to complete it on time. He uses the optimal resources. There is no cost overrun. And example after one after the other builds the confidence. But that is only going to take us. That is a past looking, in my view. What I mean by that is, whatever we continue to do, we continue to impress the people around us or the people who are going to be above us, and then that is going to put us as a possible candidate for a upgrade in our life.
Okay.
Now, the skill map we are talking about is future forward.
Okay.
In the same example that we talked about, an individual contributor migrating to being a people manager, ought to have, assuming that I want to be a people manager, then I need to acquire certain skills that are going to be important for managing a team. Now, that is something that you don't have an example to practice until you are forced upon to do that. So I always feel that I'll give this example, which will make it a lot easier. Now, whenever there was an internal position that used to open up within the company, we always had an internal interview process, which means everybody will go through a re-interview, if you call it, once in 5 years. Now, what that means is that when you have come into the job, you are performing a certain role, and then you think that you're doing very well, and then you are not that point being benchmarked with somebody who might have a better skill set at your own age or at your own experience than yourself. Then the only way by which that can be calibrated is by doing an interview internally and then assessing the candidate and comparing them with one person or two people who may be coming from an outside source. Obviously, at the end of the day, the organization needs to hire the right person. Right. It is not that loyalty is a factor, or it's not that. It is the relevance of that job that need to be performed. So we always had it as a practice. I'm not exaggerating. We always had it as a practice that the internal promotions were never given based on, okay, he has spent 5 years in this role, so let's promote him. That was never the criteria.
Okay.
It was always the criteria that we will interview him as if he's an outsider, compare him with one or two people who are really outsiders, and then map the fitment and then give the right job to the right person. So in the context of whatever we are talking about, this whole reskilling, how does it become important for an organization's growth as well as the individual's growth, is that if we are able to self-calibrate within some periodicity, that is where probably a mentor will help. He will help assessing what are the critical skills that somebody, because there are so many things around in this world we can learn, but then once we are able to articulate what we want to be really, like how you talked about the data scientist and the data engineer, all of that, once that clarity comes into our mind in terms of what we want to be, then drilling it down to what skills we ought to have becomes important, and then working on them to improve takes us to where we want to.
Sure, thank you. And without support and underwriting of our show, these shows won't be possible. So I would like to take the opportunity of this wonderful leadership series presentation with Mukundan here. So we wanted to share this from Shasta Foods in the Bay Area. Okay. And they've been our proud underwriter of our show. And so just sharing their flyer here. And also, of course, our East Bay Dental from Dr. Kamlesh Jinjwadia, one of our great friends. And again, wanted to share this for our benefit of our listeners. And these are our coordinates to get in touch with us, our channel. As you know, we do have our other cultural shows on our Tamil literary works and audio books related. And here are the coordinates for our on the Facebook, and contacts for itsdiff@gmail.com. If you like to sponsor our show, if you like to underwrite our show, if you wanted to be featured on our show, please get in touch with us at itsdiff@gmail.com. And once again, it's been a great pleasure to have Mr. Mukundan join our show. And this is we are rekindling our memories from the past, and we are I wanted to tap into all the leadership material and a great experience of 30 plus years of Mr. Mukundan on our show. And this is the first start we started with on the skill mapping. And so I would like to, before we conclude, I just wanted to quickly summarize. So, Mr. Mukundan, based on what I gleaned from this, an organization has got its policies, procedures, and processes to help inculcate a culture that helps in bringing the productivity benefits and efficiency, and also build leaders within their organization, which will help them to get into the competing environment and be the leader. Manager has to do his part, being a leadership material of unlearning, which is I heard earlier from one of my management professor in the school. It's called accelerated de-learning. I don't know, he coined the term or whatnot. He used to say that you have to unlearn what you have learned, and you cannot continue to think about the same way as an engineer. You are a manager, you have to really do something, and it's exactly what you mentioned. Thank you so much for that. So a manager's responsibility is that to identify potential skills within their subordinates and bring them and help them, guide, coach, mentor, and do that. And then as an individual, one has to constantly think about the various ambitious goals in terms of what that person plans to do, and then work towards enriching their skill. Is a lifelong learning process, and also constantly evaluate to see whether it is working or not. And if not, seek help with the coach, mentor, guide, and stuff. So as an organization level, as a manager level and also as an individual level. So, any other?
Very well summarized. Very well summarized. Very well summarized.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to add only one point here. This whole development of the whatever we want to be, career progression, individual development, being an employee to an employer, it is all self-driven. Some people, I mean, most of my staff as well, and including probably me when I started off, we thought that, okay, organization will take care. But actually, the development part is not an organization priority at all. In the sense, it is important to the organization, but it is purely self-driven.
Okay.
So, only kind of, the last word on this would be that, be it upskilling, reskilling, reskilling, whatever terminology, fancy words we start using, we need to first start with the assumption that this whole development agenda is mine and I'm going to drive. It is not the organization will support it, but the drive has to come from the individual.
Okay, so the onus is on the individual as well, rather than Absolutely. Like the other way of saying is like stop blaming that somebody is the cause for what happened to you. The cause could be within, right? Okay.
I'll just conclude it with one comment. I'd say, see, whenever there is an internal organizational promotion, for example, and there are 5 people, one guy gets promoted, for example, then the mindset of the rest of the 4 people will be, oh, he was buttering the boss, he was doing this, he was doing that, and all of that. I don't think anybody sits down to thinking, why is it that this one person was chosen and not the rest of the 4? So if we really reflect upon it in a very professional manner, I'm not leaving all the individual bias and all of that. He's of this color, he's of this one, all of that. Let's leave that aside. And there are few factors that may influence it also. I'm not saying that everywhere it is 100% perfect. But if we are able to drill down and say that, okay, let me study why is it that this one individual has gone up, then I think there'll be a lot of self-reflection that will come in. And that is the very good starting point, in my view, for our own growth into that organization.
Sure. In fact, I would like to save one of topic to continue this conversation in terms of people, as our friend Rajesh Shetty always refers to, is like how to get unstuck. Everybody feels they are stuck in the same position. Feel like somebody else around them grows and up in their career, and this person is not growing. And so in that case, what are all the tips that we can try instead of not hurting you or hurting others, and get your way and at least pave a bright future for the next year or so for your career path of 1 year, 5 year, and 10 year, right? Because one thing that I always often, he said in one of the interviews, something called presential jumping. It's like, I don't like this, so I'm jumping to something else. Then it's initially good, fine, happy, everything. After some time, you get bored, you want to jump to something else. So it's like you're going from one to the other. So you're not really looking at the root cause of what has actually happened and why you can, how you can come out of it. So maybe I'll save the topic to get your insights into in our next run. We'll definitely have a series in the next week. Any final comments? Thank you, Mr.
Mukundan. Thank you, Sri, for reconnecting. I think it's been a pleasure. And I really appreciate the audience's attention to this as well. Really a pleasure to reconnect. Whatever little we know, we will definitely be open to sharing. So I am all for it. So wishing you all the best, wishing this channel a very good future, and hopefully we'll stay connected.
Thank you, sir. And I like your quote, life's guiding principle, do the best and the best will return. So that's a wonderful way that you have said, and of your 30 plus years of experience. We would like to tap more into it, and we will get you connected in a future show. Once again, dear listeners, this is Sri Srinivasa for itsdiff Academy, and we had a great opportunity and pleasure to have met with Mr. Mukundan. Thank you, sir, and we will get you on another show very shortly. Thank you, and please do subscribe, like, and comment, and we would be posting it on itsdiff Academy, and we'll be putting it on LinkedIn as well. And if you happen to see it through any podcasting on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify, please do subscribe and write to us. We'll be very thrilled, and have a great new year ahead. Thank you all. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.